A warm welcome to the interview with Charles Eisenstein. Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm really grateful. It's a big honor for me. You touched my life with your writings, and it's really special for me to. And I'm really excited and nervous. But I'm looking forward for this 1 hour of interview. And I want to start asking you what's exciting for you in your life at the moment. What's good in you?
Well, I recently finished writing a new book, and maybe we can talk about that later, but just to answer your question, I'm feeling very free right now because I was working on it for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And every single day when I woke up, there was something hanging over my head to do. And now I'm like, I can do anything I want today. So I'm resisting jumping too quickly into anything new that's big. But I'm thinking, do I want to maybe comment more on current events and politics, or do I want to step back and maybe work on my own development and healing and the things that make life rich? I don't know. I'm a little bit in a place between right now.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, I read several books of you here,
Yeah.
And in sort of a core theme of these books is that the theme of that we are in between two stories that we're telling about civilization, or how we live, what's life. And I would like to ask you about when was it in your life when you understood about this old story, about this conventional story of our time, that something's not quite working? And what was it?
Yeah. Well, before I answer that, I want to say first that I don't think that we as a collective, as the dominant culture, have really gotten into the space between stories. I think we're still in, the old story, exploring its furthest extremes. But it hasn't really fallen apart yet. Even if people don't believe in it anymore, they still go through the motions. And the systems that embody the story of separation, of domination, of control, those systems are all still in place. But on an individual level, many, many people no longer resonate with the old narratives about humanity and progress and development and all that, and what a good life looks like. I mean, you yourself, you told me that you moved to an eco-village. Like, that wasn't on the menu when you were born.
No.
But yeah, so a lot of people are kind of a little bit lost, because when our consciousness moves out of the story of separation, we leave behind the comforting, reinforcing structures, and we don't feel at home in most of what society offers. So that, to answer your question, I mean, I've had that feeling my whole life. Probably everybody has that feeling on some level, that I don't belong here. For me, it was very strong, but I still kind of was half in, half out, enough to go to an elite university, and I don't know. Then I kind of jumped ship, went to Taiwan. I was a translator. I just kind of stayed out of the success arc as it had been given to me. And then, so what happened? I moved back. I mean, there's many different landmarks on this story, but I moved back to the States when I started having children, thinking that I had this like idea of suburbia at its best, with packs of kids running around and the neighbors chatting to each other and sharing produce from their gardens with each other, and neighborhood volleyball games. Like when I was a kid, we had that.
Okay. Yeah.
Volleyball games, neighborhood barbecues, cookouts, you know. And so I moved back to suburbia, and there wasn't anything like that anymore. The neighborhood park was empty of children. Once in a while, you'd see a mom pushing a 3-year-old on a swing, but there weren't kids outside anymore. There wasn't play. And the neighbors, none of them knew each other. It was just a bunch of strangers, maybe saying hi, waving as they drove out of their garage. But there was almost no interaction, no community, nothing that I had. But the worst of it was no children outside playing. Like you had to make play dates. And I struggled to understand this. On one level, it was quite obvious. Walking down the street and seeing a blue glow emanating from every living room, I knew where the kids were. But then the fact that no one walks anywhere, everyone drives to wherever they're going, so that's another opportunity for interaction that's gone. And the fact that everyone's work is for a distant corporation, and everything that people source in their lives is from a supermarket or from Walmart. So there's no connections anymore. So I began to just kind of unravel this puzzle. And the deeper I traced it, the more total, the more all-encompassing it became. And then I began to understand how this suburbia, as it had become, was had the same root as the medical system and the educational system and the political system and ecological destruction, all coming down to different flavors of the same theme of separation. So that's like kind of intellectual level, but it really started as this personal thing, just walking around. Where are the kids? This can't be right, you know? And the feeling I don't belong here. Yeah.
Yeah. So you describe very deeply this paradigm of separation we have been born into, and maybe let's focus more in this talk about this other paradigm or new story you are describing. Yes, maybe you can just talk about this and explain it to the people who have not read your books yet. Okay.
Sometimes I think that everybody on a program like this has definitely read my books, and I'm just repeating myself.
Great, not.
Yeah, it's probably not as many as I think sometimes. So sometimes I call it, for short, the new story, but it's not a new story at all. It's actually much older than the old story. It's a very ancient story that all human beings at one time lived in. For some of us, it was 100 years ago. Our ancestors lived in the story of interbeing, which is more than interdependency or interconnection. It means that our very existence is relational. We're not a separate self, but we are the totality of all of our relationships, which means that every relationship that you have mirrors something inside, that everything you do to the world somehow comes back to affect yourself, that the qualities that define you as a self, that make you a being, like consciousness, agency, subjectivity, sentience, these qualities are in the whole world. Not just in you, not just in human beings, not just in animals, but even in plants, soil, water, the sun, the moon, the wind, the clouds. Now this gets into territory that some people might say, oh, that's just spiritual bullshit. It's just spiritual stuff. And this is not about, so the story I'm talking about isn't to say, okay, we have this boring matter, but there's this other mysterious thing on top of matter. No, it's to say that matter itself is so much more subtle and mysterious and magnificent than we have made it in our perceptions. Old story saying it's just a bunch of generic building blocks interacting according to arbitrary mathematical forces. In that story, you are a victim of the world. These random hurricanes, these random things, a meteor could land on your head, it's just this random struggle out there. And so your well-being comes through control, through insulating yourself from these hostile competitors and random forces. And humanity's progress in the old story means that collectively we become the masters of nature. We harness natural forces, we dominate all of our competitors, we transform the world into something useful for us. Why not? It's just a bunch of stuff. In the new story, we understand that the world is a being too that intimately involves us. It's not here just for us to turn into resources and to impose our intelligence onto, because it has an intelligence already. So the relationship then becomes, how do we create together? What does the world want? How can I serve this intelligence, this process that includes self, humanity, and all beings? What is my role in something happening that's much bigger than me, much bigger than my intelligence, much bigger than what I can impose through the technologies of control? So the first step in human participation in the world becomes listening. And what we become capable of is much bigger than what we can make happen through technologies of force, because we can align ourselves with much greater powers. So I think that to make it more practical, things like permaculture or regenerative agriculture are beautiful examples of technologies or ways of participating that come from a new story. Because how do we serve the soil? How do we serve the land? Recognizing an intelligence in it that wants to be revealed. Or holistic health practices too. Recognizing an intelligence in the body, how do we align with that? So those are some examples of the way of thinking that I'm calling a new and ancient story.
How would the world be if this would come in more into our systems, or if this would arrive in politics, economy? How would this look like, feel like?
Well,
because I feel what we miss in our times is sort of imagination. Like Rob Hopkins also says, we miss imagination of imagining a positive, attractive future. Yeah? How can it be? And for me, you are one of the people who are capable of sensing into how it could be.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I get these glimpses of what it could be. So, for example, today we have a political culture that is based on fear and based on, I would say, domination. You have a problem. If there's any problem, the current response is to find the enemy and then to destroy the enemy. So this happens obviously in foreign policy. There's terrorism. Find the terrorist, kill the terrorist.
War on terrorism.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe it's immigration. Yeah. Why is there, there's an immigration problem. So one side says, keep them out, build a wall. The other side says, no, we have to let them in. We can't be so mean. But which side says, why is there so much immigration wanting to happen? What makes people so desperate to leave their home, to leave all of their security, to leave their culture, sometimes to leave their children? What makes them so desperate to risk their lives that they would uproot themselves? That is, so a political policy based on interbeing, based on the new story, would start with that question. That's the listening. And then pretty soon you get to causes like military imperialism, neoliberal economics, the imposition of austerity, the global debt system that is making life unlivable places. Mm-hmm. And then you hit the stage of, I don't know what to do, because this problem involves me. It involves the whole system. Mm-hmm. And the solutions do not exist in the practical discourse of current politics. Mm-hmm. The solutions are things like debt cancellation or debt revolt, mm-hmm. things like that. Mm-hmm. And that would essentially bring down the financial system. And then we can think about what would a financial system, a money system, or an economy look like if it were based on principles of interbeing, principles of gift. Mm-hmm. It would be non-accumulative. You wouldn't be able to make money by just having money. So this is something I wrote about in a book called Sacred Economics. I guess you've read. So
yes, it's here. So I can recommend it. Yeah, we'll put the link below.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm not sure how much detail I want to go into here, but
let's go a little bit into it because it's so much in our lives. The money, economy,
yeah. So just to do a little economic visioning then, one part of it is basically the economy of interbeing is the economy of gift. So how to make a money system embody some of the qualities of gift. One thing is that it's non-accumulative, as I just said. The Islamic finance thinkers have the right idea. Mm-hmm. Interest basically is the way to, and by the way, Christian teachings used to also mm-hmm. prohibit interest. Mm-hmm. So if in an interest-based system, the more you have, the more you make, the more rich you are. So wealth is a matter of accumulation, control, hoarding. Mm-hmm. If you had money that decayed, mm-hmm. that lost its value intrinsically, then you wouldn't be able to be rich by holding on to it. So one way that this could happen is through a liquidity fee on bank reserves, mm-hmm. which is also already kind of happening or wanting to happen, especially in Europe, Japan, where negative interest rates are starting to appear. So that's one kind of more technical application. Another that taps into the spirit of gift is universal basic income, mm-hmm. which is also a popular idea now in Europe, mm-hmm. because it's saying who you are fundamentally is not a selfish competitor seeking to maximize your own security and comfort. That's the self in the story of separation. In the story of interbeing, who you are is a gift bringer. Who you are is someone with an important, necessary role to play in the unfolding of our common purpose. Therefore, your basic drive is to contribute to something beyond yourself. So it's universal basic income transmits that message to people mm-hmm. and backs it up with material support and says, I know you. Mm-hmm. You want to do something great. You want to do something beautiful. And I'm not even sure what that is. Mm-hmm. I trust you to know. I trust you to know if it's something that does bring measurable benefits to society, like maybe you're developing solar panels or something like that. But maybe it's to take care of your grandmother. Mm. Maybe she needs your care for a year or 2 years. Maybe it's to take care of a small piece of land, to rebuild the soil on some place. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's to befriend a homeless person and be a support for them. I don't know what calls to you, but I trust you. And I want to support that. So if society agrees on this trust, then universal basic income is a natural next step. And hey, like a lot of us are wounded. Like there are going to be people who are going to take that money and they're going to drink beer for 5 years. They're going to rest. They're going to lick their wounds. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying like everyone automatically becomes like a magical genius and begins, but yeah, so that would be like a little taste of what society could look like in the midterm. I mean, in the distant future, sometimes I just run into people who, through grace, through luck, through having hippie parents, are in touch with some of their genius. Mm-hmm. We tend to think of them as extraordinary individuals, and in the current context, they are. But there's another sense that they are revealing something that's in ourselves as well. Mm-hmm. That we all have a suppressed genius. What would society look like if everybody were in the full flower of that? Mm-hmm. It is indescribable to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel it.
Yeah.
Shivers. Maybe you can talk about what we, each of us, can do now, not in far future, but to do now to live more in this new paradigm, or how can we live our lives to you understood the question.
Yeah. Sometimes people ask me for, okay, what's the highest impact thing I can do? What has the most leverage, the most scalability?
Yeah, but it's part of the old story.
That's right.
Of thinking.
It is. Yeah, if I had like an instruction set for you, like I'd be the guy with the answer.
First, second, third.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not the guy with the answers. What I could say, because the answer for what can I do for one person, it might be to plant a garden. Mm. For another person, it might be something totally different. It might be something more political. Mm. For another person, it could be something very personal or relational. Mm. I think that the next step will arise from embracing a vision of yourself that feels real to you, to integrate this, what I'm saying, that you are here as a bringer of a gift, that you are called to give that gift, and to get in touch with the willingness to do that, which might involve a sacrifice. Because if you are at a stage where you're ready to give more, and that doesn't mean to make do with less. Okay, the kind of sacrifice I'm talking about is the sacrifice of something that you're ready to sacrifice that almost feels like a burden now. It could be something very abstract or psychological. It could be the sacrifice of having been right all along. It could be the sacrifice of being visible as a leader, being admired as someone who's making a difference. Because maybe the next step into listening to the call and meeting the call with a gift, maybe that next step is something that's not public, that's not celebrated, that's not visible. So the willingness comes from a dissatisfaction with the way that your life is right now. Mm-hmm. And it's the feeling, I want to up my game. I want to be more effective. Mm-hmm. Because maybe you've had these experiences, little glimpses of what it could be like, where you're really there for somebody, or you're really available in a situation, and your gifts are utilized. Mm-hmm. And you express them, and it feels really good, and you feel, this is what I'm here to do. So that willingness which comes from maybe impatience even, or frustration, or feeling like confined. Yeah, that willingness calls to it opportunities that you begin to recognize, but it also calls a sacrifice, because who you have been is not aligned with this expanded state. Mm-hmm. Something is going to have to drop away for you to be there. Mm-hmm. And the mind of separation wants to make this really hard, wants to make it into a big sacrifice. So I just want to say again, it could be something that you're kind of sick of that, you know? Mm-hmm. Kind of sick of always trying to gain people's approval. Kind of sick of always trying to be the rescuer, being the good guy. Kind of sick of holding back because what if this, what if that, what if that? Yeah, I'm ready to put it all in there. Like that kind of feeling, that's the sign of the sacrifice. Yeah, so I'm like, I mean, this, you know, people would like for me to say, you know, change your light bulbs and use, you know, water consuming washing machines, et cetera. But these are very superficial. Mm-hmm. What I know to do is not enough. Something knows, though.
What you know, what we know is not enough. You mean going deeper into this inquiry, into this not knowing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We don't have a plan. Mm-hmm. Any plan that I could make would be the wrong plan. And it's not to say I shouldn't make a plan, mm-hmm. but I should know. I should be willing and open to doing things that are outside the plan, mm-hmm. that are part of a bigger plan. Mm-hmm. That's a mysterious, beyond human plan. Mm-hmm. And how do the steps in that plan get communicated to us? Mm-hmm. It's not through the mind. Mm-hmm. The mind orients us toward that field of information, but it comes in through the heart. It's the things that call to us, call to our care.
So in this, it needs a good connection to ourselves and to our heart, yeah, to really also sense what's next. And I wonder, what do you suggest to strengthen or to find this deeper connection, this inner voice?
Yeah, we always want to have a practical, what should I do? So now it becomes, what do I do to strengthen the connection to my heart? I believe that this comes as a gift. Mm. It might be coming even through this conversation. Or it might be coming through somebody in your life who awakens new capacities of the heart by being so generous to you, or by naming something that they see in you, by showing you unconditional love. So perhaps another question, maybe a better question than what do I do to gain clearer communication through the heart, is what can I do to help others gain this clearer communication? Maybe this is something that we don't do for ourselves, but we do for each other. So maybe you have an opportunity where you meet a young man and he's stuck. Maybe he's in despair. Maybe he's suicidal. And you name for him his gift. And you name for him that, young man, you're not crazy, actually. Your feeling of a deep wrongness, that's not a wrongness in you. It's a wrongness in the world. You're not crazy for thinking that. You're not crazy for wanting to get out of that. But you have the strength to turn all of the trauma that's happened to you into a gift. And your healing from that creates a template of healing for everybody else who's ever been in that situation. So you say something like that to them, and this is not a formula. Mm-hmm. But through the deep question of who are you? What is it like to be you? Through that empathy, you will know what to say. And the love will land. Like even self-love, like how do we learn that? Maybe it's by being loved by others. So you can do that for people, and they'll do it for you. Other people will do it for you in a big circle. I think that's how it works.
Beautiful.
I mean, it's not that like, I haven't done work on myself, but the key moments that even gave me the idea of doing this work on myself, those were not something I did to myself. That was the intervention of someone else or something else. We're not alone here. We have allies.
So part of this path is watching out what's coming to us, and what's wanting to come and wanting to emerge, and to.
Yeah, I would go back to listening, to observing, with the intention. I mean, it's a specific kind of listening. With the intention of what am I here to do? What am I called to do? What is mine to say right now? What is the dream of the land here? What is the dream of the river? What is the dream of this organization? What is its highest calling? What is it like to be you? Who are you becoming? What is your next incarnation? How can I serve this glorious being that is emerging right now? That's the kind of listening that I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's like a friend of mine who spent time with the Zapatista movement, saying like, in a questioning mode, we're walking on. Like by questioning, we're walking on. So always this, question, what's wanting to come. One thing I wanted to talk about, and what I'm really grateful for, is we are with Pioneers of Change. We have been supporting early stage change makers. I don't like the word. I'm missing a better one. Maybe you have one. And social entrepreneurs. And one day I had critical talks with people, and I understood that there's something within me where I had this, okay, when you make big projects, it's better than when you make small projects. Yeah? When you have big things where you have impact and numbers and you can show it, it's better than when you have a nice, beautiful thing. Yeah. And in one of your books, you wrote about this story of the Adbusters founder who was thinking of he could do this job and or should he take care of his grandmother, and he was sick. So you helped.
It was his ex-wife's mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you helped me understand that. Well, this is a crazy thing. We're living in a non-linear world. I don't know what this little act of love can bring to the whole in ripple effects or invisible on an invisible level. And I'm very grateful for that. Huh?
So let me ask you a question. Who was the most important person in the history of South Africa?
You know, as the first thing is coming is very clear, no?
Yeah, most people would say Nelson Mandela.
Yeah. So I was thinking Wangari Maathai, but it's the same thinking in a way, yeah?
So you know, I mean, without Nelson Mandela holding peace after being in prison for 20 years, probably South Africa would have descended into bloodshed.
Yeah.
But thanks to him, it did not. So you could say he's the most important person in the history of South Africa.
Yeah.
But then you ask, where did he get that resilience? Where did he get that grounding in love that he was able to maintain it through prison, despite many invitations to go on the war path. Maybe, I don't know the answer to that, but maybe it was his grandmother. Maybe actually it was his grandmother who was the most important person in the history of South Africa. Mm-hmm. So that means that if you want to have a great impact on a long time scale, not just make big, fancy, impressive changes that come and they maybe go, they become a fad, but you really want to change the deep currents, not just make big waves in the surface, but change the deep currents that will create a better world in 100 years or 500 years. Then maybe your role is to be like Nelson Mandela. But maybe your role is to be like Nelson Mandela's grandmother. Not everybody can be a big change maker with a big social enterprise, a big mailing list, a big platform, lots of money, and lots of people working for you. Right? Only a very small fraction of people can be big in comparison to everybody else. When you have a story that says that bigger is better, more is better, you end up having everybody in competition to get big. And you are replicating the old story. It's just different. It's old wine and new skin. You know, it's just the same basic thought forms, the same template. And the results will be the same in one way or another. So it is to the mind of separation, which is steeped in Newtonian physics, where change happens through the application of a force on a mass. It seems counterintuitive that to fulfill your destiny as a servant of a new story, as a servant of a more beautiful world, that you would do small things, that you would go half time on your job to take care of your ex-wife's mother. Like, you don't even have any legal obligation. Why would you do that? You know? Or one of my friends, super capable woman, but her child is autistic. So she's spent 10, 15 years now, basically, because the whole way that society manages autistic and otherwise mentally different people, she's like, this is all wrong. They're being warehoused, they're being managed, you know, but they have tremendous gifts. So she's just with her one son, she's not doing it for everybody. She's not building a big organization. She's wrestling with the system and trying to make a better life for her son. Now, I don't know what that will turn into in 20 years. It might turn into an organization. It might turn into whole new protocols and methods for the development of such children, but it might not. It might be completely invisible. However, according to the principle of morphic resonance, which Rupert Sheldrake developed, and I'm very fond of this way of thinking. Basically, it says that any change that happens in one place creates a field of change that makes the same change more easily happen somewhere else. Perhaps because people find out about it. Perhaps because it goes viral. But perhaps it's something much more mysterious, too. So that means that we can rest in peace, knowing that anything that we do, any act of generosity, any act of empathy, any act of kindness, strengthens the field of generosity, empathy, and kindness. And it's not to say that we, on purpose, keep it a secret. On purpose, don't get big. But we don't have to. We're not in anxiety that what I do doesn't make a difference unless I scale it up. We're therefore free to scale it up if that's what's being called, and not if that's not what's being called. Like I do these retreats, you know, like which I limit to 30 people. And it's 5 days together. We just go really deep into these things, mentally, but also on other levels. And so, and I don't, expand it beyond 30 because then we can't really sit in a circle and everybody get heard and all that, right? So I keep them at 30, but okay, like last time, the thing filled up in like a day and there was a big waiting list, and I'm like, okay, this is a call to scale it up somehow and to do a bigger event. It's not because I'm like, okay, now I'm going to make this go big. Mm-hmm. It's because I'm hearing a call to do it. But I don't think it's going to necessarily be more impactful. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's more impactful to have it really, really small and intimate, and it's like this resonance chamber, where everyone gets really charged with new story in this tight field we make, and then they go out there and maybe that's actually more impactful. I don't know. All I know is like my mind can't sort that out. You can't figure that out by the math. And that's true of so much of what's going on in this world today. So I'm not saying the mind is useless or math is useless, but this is not something that the math can help us decide. We have to decide on another basis.
It's beautiful. An interesting paradox is what also Margaret Wheatley said in an interview I did with her last year. She said, don't do anything because of impact. Yeah?
Good for her. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is something, where I was thinking about, because I want to have impact, yeah? And at the same time, yes, it's sort of synced in. Can you say this in English? It entered more deep to this, do things because they're right, yeah, and also with a joyous feeling, yeah. So
yeah. Right. And I just want to qualify that, though, to say don't do things because of impact doesn't mean to ignore the impact of what you do.
Yeah.
It's because you might, it's not to say just sit there and play Tetris. Because but it is and this comes back to the listening and to the observing. When you take in the information about what's happening in the world, that feeds the choice-making function. But you don't condition it on those things. You take in the information and you trust that, knowing that your natural choices will change to incorporate that information.
Maybe it would be a moment now that you share a bit about what you have been working on in the last 2 years and what your new book is about.
Sure. Yeah. So the book is called Climate, A New Story. I almost didn't want to put climate in the title because people think they know what it's going to say. It's going to sound the alarm for urgent action to meet the rising levels of CO2 while there's still a window of opportunity to prevent catastrophic climate change. Like that's the standard narrative. And I think that that narrative is counterproductive and damaging and a disaster for environmentalism. So, I mean, this is a big topic, of course. One thing, though, that I'll pick one thread from it, which is that the climate narrative sucks the air out of the room for other environmental issues. Anything that doesn't seem to
the master
affect.
Issue.
What's that?
The master issue.
That's right. Yeah. It's the same pattern as find a single cause and go to war against that cause that I was talking about before. Find, here's the problem, here's the solution. So it's a very linear mindset. And so things like saving the whales become less important, not to mention housing the homeless. I mean, from the climate perspective, it might actually be a bad thing to bring the homeless into society because as scavengers on the streets, they have a very low carbon footprint. But bring them into society, they become productive members of society again. Ebenezer Scrooge would be proud of this, right? You know, in Charles Dickens in the
this
reference, he says, someone comes to his office to collect charity for the poor, and he says, "Let them starve; it'll solve the population problem." So anyway, so yeah, so the climate issue takes energy away from anything that seems not to have any effect on climate. Mm-hmm. And in the book, I argue that the things that we think are kind of irrelevant to climate because they don't show up in our metrics and our models actually are way more important than we think, because Earth is not a machine. It is a living being. So the whales, the elephants, the rhinoceri, the not to mention the mangrove swamps, the coral reefs, all these things, these are the organs of Gaia. These are the cells, these are the tissues. And if we continue to destroy them, even if we cut emissions to zero overnight, the planet will still die a death of 1 million cuts. And so I flesh this out in the book. I say, actually, even from the carbon perspective, soil, water, mangroves, wetlands, forests, grasslands, et cetera, are much more important than we thought. And the carbon perspective is way, way too narrow. So basically the book is saying we have to shift our emphasis onto soil, water, ecosystems, and biodiversity. Mm-hmm. And otherwise we're going to have we could have a planet that's like a giant field of solar arrays, carbon sucking machines, geoengineering machines, algae pools to make oxygen. The climate will be fine. Possibly. But and so another point is that the whole narrative is basically, we'd better do something about the environment or bad things are going to happen to us. So the logic is, why? Why do anything? Because of ourselves. That is the same mentality that has got us into this situation. Mm-hmm. Nature being seen as valuable for ourselves. Mm-hmm. Whereas the early environmental movement wasn't like that. Mm-hmm. It didn't say, save the whales or we'll be fucked. Mm-hmm. It said, save the whales because they're so beautiful. We need to, that is where we need to go. We need to fall in love with this earth. So now I know that probably most climate activists are ultimately coming from love. But the rhetoric, the logic, the strategy is very often directed at provoking fear and self-interest. Mm. That's a mistake. Mm. Strengthening, because what's really in your self-interest, if you want to go there, it's to use as much fossil fuel as possible and let somebody else make the cuts. That's in your self-interest.
As long as we still can.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just a little taste of the book. Mm. Yeah, and we'll see. We'll see where it goes. I'm a little, not too nervous, but a little bit nervous because, if you deviate from the party line, you get called a denier. Mm. And if you believe that the whole world hangs in the balance of cutting carbon emissions as fast as possible, I'm saying no. That's not what we need to do. That's not the top priority.
So what's the top priority, to make it clear?
Well, I said soil, water, biodiversity.
Yeah.
Things like regenerative agriculture. Like if I had to put one thing as top priority, I would say heal the soil, heal the water. Mm-hmm. Preserve the rainforests. Like absolute moratorium on any cutting of rainforests or any virgin forest. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that, involves every system we have. Like, what was it? Ecuador, I think. They have all this oil, and they said to the international community, we'd like to keep the oil in the ground. And we could make, the oil is worth, I don't know, can't remember the figure, say it was $70 billion. If the international community can fund us with half of that, then we'll keep the oil in the ground. But that didn't happen. So essentially, if we say, Ecuador, don't pump your oil, but keep paying your debt, where are they going to get that money? Either through pumping oil or cutting down forests or doing something to convert their natural resources into money. So it's hypocritical to maintain our current financial system in place and also ask countries to conserve their natural resources. So again, the money question is inescapable, as you know. I mean, any of you doing any change-making work, any ecological healing work, anything beautiful in the world, usually money's not your friend, is it? Usually not. Because the whole thing is tilted in favor of the endless growth of the human realm and the conversion of nature into money and relationships into money too. That's what it was in suburbia. There were no relationships anymore because everybody bought everything, even play.
Childcare and everything.
Childcare, cooking, music, recreation. Yeah. So it's time to reverse that. It's all the healing is tied together.
Maybe this image of suburbia also reminds me of something I would like to ask you about. Well, when we in Europe look at what's going on in the US, it's quite amazing and irritating. And I wonder what is it? I'm waiting for helping me. No, I'm waiting for the moment when I understand what is it good for, the whole theater on the surface, and what's emerging from below. And when I talk to friends from the US, and they don't know anybody who have voted for Trump, for example. And so I'm really amazed to see this culture and wonder is it something where sort of the old thing is just doing its final big woo, or how do you, before the new new currents emerge, which is not so easy sometimes.
I mean, I think that in a way, it's a positive thing that Trump was elected, because in one place I said Hillary Clinton would have been a wolf in sheep's clothing. Trump is a wolf in wolf's clothing. So, here we have this obviously malignant narcissist clown blowhard as president. It makes it just so the pretense cannot be maintained. The pretense of America, champion of peace and democracy and liberty in the world. You could pretend. You had to be pretty delusional, I think, even under Obama, to pretend that. But you could still pretend that the status quo on this world was okay. But for people outside America, it makes it much harder to pretend anymore. So, it's not like America all of a sudden turned bad. We've always, for my entire lifetime, we've been the dominant imperial power in this world, administering the exploitation of people and nature around the planet, and enforcing it with military force when necessary. Any country that resists, it's the conversion of life into money, they will get regime changed. Like, this is not something that began with Donald Trump. In fact, he's probably a less competent administrator of this system than Hillary Clinton or, Barack Obama was. So, I hope he doesn't start World War III and shit like that. And like, he has terrible environmental policies, and the immigration, brutal. There's, I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump, but I don't think he's qualitatively worse than Hillary Clinton would have been. And the people who voted for him here, I think a lot of them were just, giving the finger to the system.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them maybe desperately clinging to an old story that they know is dying. Others like by electing a clown, they're basically rejecting the entire political system. And they're essentially expressing their total alienation. So there's some of that too.
Yeah, but what I was wondering, is it that sort of below the surface, this is sort of helping to wake people to wake up and to connect in a new level, and that a new movement is rising up? Is there something like this?
Yeah, I don't know. If the new movement is get rid of this horrible guy Trump, then the movement will end as soon as he's replaced by someone slightly less horrible. So that's not a hopeful sign for me. Any movement that's based on, finally, we found the bad guy. Let's destroy it. That's more of the same.
Yeah.
There are much deeper movements afoot, though.
How do you see? Is it okay when you go a few minutes more?
Yeah, sure.
How do you see the Occupy movement where you were involved in now in retrospect?
I wasn't that involved. I went there, I spoke there once and commented on it a bit, but I was never really that much of a part of it. There were some things I really liked about it. I liked that it kind of went beyond politics into kind of, you could say, consciousness, into like awareness of interbeing. But I feel like it kind of got hijacked into really polarized thinking, where it becomes a matter of tearing down the 1% or blaming the 1%. The 1% are playing out roles that are defined by the system. You take them down and new ones will come if the system doesn't change. So, I feel like it didn't go deep enough. And the deeper it goes, I think the more that we question traditional activist tactics, which doesn't mean to sit there and do nothing.
You are always talking about the more beautiful world our heart knows is possible.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you this question. What would be the most beautiful question I could ask you?
It would be the question that comes from a genuine trouble in your heart, something that you're really curious about for real.
Let me just sense what's coming. So my question is, when I sense out into this world, I often have sometimes like waves of pain, where I feel this pain of the world, things dying, so I feel this, and I wonder if you know this and how do you deal with this?
That's good. Yeah, feeling that will keep you honest.
Mm. Yeah.
Better to feel it than to shut it away.
Yeah. Hmm. I often end my interviews with the question, what would you wish, no, how do you say this in English? The people who are watching this, would you wish to see, or what do you wish for them?
I wish for them that they continue to receive timely reminders that validate and strengthen what they know in their hearts, and that support them in unfolding to the next step of courage in offering their gifts. Yeah, that the age of loneliness is over for you.
Yeah.
That there's enough people around you now coming into your field who are doing things just as crazy as you do, or as you want to do. That's my wish.
Yes. I thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm sitting here now with a lot of joy and this feeling of beauty, yeah, of this, that this is possible, yeah, that I can connect with you here and that we can spread this. And well, I'm looking forward for this path of joyful exploration and unfolding. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for this conversation.
I thank you very much for taking the time and wish you all the best. And
thank you, Mark.
Looking forward to reading the new book.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay.